Happy Thursday, ladies and gents. Welcome to an exciting show. Today we're talking about something that's actually quite near and dear to my heart. Now, here's a quick fact for you to introduce what we're talking about. Since 2012, 11th October has been marked as the International Day of the Girl. The day aims to highlight and address the needs and the various challenges that girls face while promoting their empowerment and the fulfillment of their human rights. Now, our guests for the show, as we get into the importance of empowering the girl child, our guests are two incredible young ladies. I'm going to say young, right? Yeah, we're going to go with young. Incredible ladies who've done so much and have dedicated their lives to making sure that they're championing for the young ladies, the young girls that are coming up in this world. And the first person I'm going to introduce is Purity Kagwiria, who's the Executive Director at Akili Dada, which is an award-winning leadership incubator, cultivating transformative leadership in a generation of young African women. The second lady is none other than Josephine Macharia, who's the project director of the Better for Kenya campaign, which I'm pretty certain you must have seen by now. Now, the idea of the campaign is that it's meant to amplify public discourse and put pressure on the government so that they can prioritize gender equality.
Yep.
Welcome, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
How are you doing today? How are you feeling?
Good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, really
are you
excited.
Excited?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
good. Are you feeling pumped every time we get to sort of put the girl and the woman at the forefront of conversation? You're like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about, yeah.
Yeah, I think we don't have enough conversations about girls and young women.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. So this is a good opportunity. The fact there's actually a day dedicated to celebrate girls means there's something about girls that needs to be celebrated and to be talked about.
Loads, actually.
Yeah,
and I like the fact, to just add on to what you're saying, that we're now moving beyond it being an NGO conversation or policy people, that people are beginning to own it and say, hey, you know what, I have a role and I have a part to play in ensuring that this message is actually heard and that change happens sooner rather than later. So that's what I love.
And then it starts with everyone. Literally everyone.
Yeah.
Even you watching at home, you don't have to have a certain kind of following or a certain kind of job for you to have an impact. It starts with you. Now, were you always interested in sort of like social enterprise or engagements around building the girl child, or is it something that just came up?
So for me, I was always interested, and it's because I find this is really personal to me, because I grew up from a really underprivileged background. I was brought up by my grandparents, and in high school, the only reason I made it through high school is because my classmates would go to the administration and ask the administration to allow me to be in school. That's how I got to do my KCSE.
Right. Is that because your grandparents didn't think?
So my grandparents didn't have money, and
okay.
I had a really absentee mother. So my grandparents did their best to pay my school fees, took debts. My great-grandfather paid a bit of my school fees, but of course when he gave me 2,000 shillings, it looked like he had given me all his money, and it didn't really go far in paying my school fees. So I spent a lot of time really being sent home for fees. But my classmates intervened with the school administration. I finished high school and I started serving in a local church, and I applied to Kenya Institute of Mass Communication. And when I got my letter to go to Kenya Institute of Mass Communication, this church that I used to go to, the senior pastor one day stood up and said, we've been seeing this girl serving in church. How about we support her to achieve her dream?
Wow.
So the church came together. Each person contributed, I think, 500 shillings. It paid my school fees for a whole year. And then a couple of families came together and said they're going to support me for the time I was at Kenya Institute of Mass Communication. And that's how I got to make it.
Right, and I can see that service for you was something that started from long ago, and that there was always this sense of community around you, whether it's your friends rallying up to try and support you, or the church in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to be able to pay it forward.
Right,
so that's
which
why
is why
I do what I do.
Yeah, exactly. Which we're going to get into in a moment. But for you, Josephine, I'm wondering, were you always is this what you studied in school, things to do with empowerment and the girl child and social service?
So after her story, I'd like to say, yes, I was born for this.
Yeah.
But no, not really. So I think for me, the passion has always been, when I sit here, I'm the sum total of so many people who've always inspired me, challenged me, and told me, hey, you know what, you can do much better.
Yeah.
So for me, my journey was different. I've always been a creative at heart. I still am.
Yeah.
But the one thing that has always been a constant is I'm not moving alone. Like, I need to bring people along. So whether it's my peers, whether it's in the family, I'm always there like, no, imagine, there's more to you. So I'm always about challenging people and just carrying people so that we move together and we have a greater impact.
Right.
So that for me has been my story.
Okay, so
Yes.
how did speaking about the girl child or gender equality become important in your life? When did it become important?
Very interesting. It became important last year.
Yeah.
Last year intentionally,
Yeah,
but when I look
intentionally.
back, I've always been
Right.
passionate about gender equality, but I was
Yeah.
not calling it that.
Yeah.
So I was always passionate about empowering the girl. She shouldn't be left behind. But last year, when Janet Bogwa, who was then the one who put together the whole team for Better for Kenya,
Yeah.
approached me and told me I'm working on this project. At first I was there like, oh, okay, another big word, like, so really break it down. Maybe the creative women, they're like, okay, I feel you, more power to you, but can you be more specific? So the more I got to understand what gender equality is, what it involves, I was there like, I was appalled.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And no one is doing anything about this?
Yeah.
So for me, it became an everyday conversation,
Yeah.
as opposed to International Day of the Girl, Women's Day. For me, that's when it became real.
Right.
And I was there like, you know what, I need to be part of this, and I want to do so much more where I am and with the skills I have.
Right,
Yes.
I hear you. Maybe on that note, then you can tell us a little bit more about Better for Kenya. What is this initiative?
Excellent. So Better for Kenya was launched this year, and it feels like 3 years ago.
Wait, was it this year?
I know, right?
No.
Beginning of this
Just
year.
when it wasn't
It's
this
a
year.
I promise
this
you,
year.
March 8th, International Women's Day.
No.
I know, Sharon. Even every time I'm there, like, no, it must have been 10 years ago.
Maybe it's also because I had the conversation with Janet last year.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe that's why. And then,
Yes.
you know, it started coming to my forefront a little bit more. So I feel like
It's been
the initiative has been there for a long time, but I guess not.
Yeah,
March
so
8th.
International Day, and the whole idea is to just raise awareness about the public discourse, and more importantly, to put pressure on the government to prioritize gender equality. The reality is there's so many laws, and we appreciate that have been passed around gender equality, whether it's sanitary pads provision, whether it's a 2/3 gender rule, but at the end of the day, they're still in documents. At times I imagine it's just a file somewhere waiting to be acted
getting
on.
dusty.
So that's the whole purpose behind Better for Kenya. So they've brought together strong voices, and these are 5 key influencers. So we have Janet Bogwa, we have Adele Onyango, we have Amina Abdi, we have King Kaka, yay, the one gentleman, and yours truly, Sharon Mundia. So, and you guys are amazing. So the whole idea is, when you were brought together, the whole idea is to get each influencer to use their platform as a place to raise awareness around gender equality, around things they're passionate about. So from when we began, we have talked about gender-based violence, we've done FGM, we've done the role of men in ending, in supporting, or rather, gender equality. We've also demystified, so, okay, so gender equality, what do you really mean? We've broken it down. Then we had a session with Ambassador Tegla Lorupe, because the team that has brought together Better for Kenya is Hive. Then we have Athletes for Hope, and supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we use influencers, but also athletes, because they are powerful people in society. So we had a session with Tegla Lorupe, and her community FGM is rampant. So we had a community visit in Kagwiria. So that's what we've done thus far.
Yeah, and I like that you're also welcoming everyone to join in on the conversation.
Definitely.
Now, Beauty, tell me about Akili Dada, which obviously is something that is so close to your heart. Upon hearing her story, you'll understand why she ended up in the role that she's in right now?
Yeah, so at Akili Dada, we work with girls and young women who are from underprivileged backgrounds. We work with girls in high schools, young women in university, and young women social entrepreneurs. And actually last year we also worked with a bunch of young women in who are interested in political participation. And we worked with a class of 45 young women when we started. These are young women who are vying for the first time in this country.
Yeah.
And by the time we came to the polls, we had 11 of them who went to the ballot. And we do think like in another 5-10 years, we will be able to field more young women into these spaces.
Yeah.
But the core work of Akili Dada is actually to invest in girls in high schools through mentorship, paying scholarships for girls who are really bright, coming from poor households, who end up in schools like the Kenya High, the Mary Hill, and the Loretos. Because we do recognize that many of them make it to these schools, but then the challenges that they encounter, some of them is you don't even have a pair of shoes, or your accent is not right in this particular space. And so we couple the scholarship with mentorship so that they can know there are other women who've been through these same paths, and they have made it with their accent or not, or with, you know, look at what you have rather than what you don't have. And on top of that, we couple that with leadership development, just because we do recognize that if girls and young women figure out their own leadership early, they are more likely to lead in the future, lead in the public spaces in the future.
So how do you decide on which girls you'll bring into the scholarship program?
So we have the girls decide.
Really?
The way we structured our scholarship program is that we will go to a high school. So we've had a long partnership, say, with Precious Blood in Kagwiria. We go to the school and drop an application form, and the school announces at the assembly. So any girl who wants to apply for a scholarship will go and pick the form and fill it in without their parent, without their teachers. Then we take the forms. We then, you know, read through their essays and what they say about themselves. And then we have an interview. We have an interview with the girl first on her own. And then after we've interviewed her, we look at the school file to see who is it that brought her to school, where does this girl come from, and things like that. After that, then we will now contact the parents and say to them, we are thinking of offering your daughter a scholarship because of XYZ. And then the parents will welcome us to their homes. We do a site visit, and then we sign a contract.
It's quite exhaustive.
It's quite exhaustive, so that we also so that we get the right girls into the program.
So what are some of the ways that you would say that the girl is being disempowered in society today, Josephine?
I think the first part is the narrative she's being sold to every day. The story she's being told is that your space is limited, like the things you can do. It's almost like you're born with defined parameters, whereas the boy child grows up and, hey, you can be anything, you can be who you want to be. So if we start by changing the narrative and being very conscious on what we are telling the girl child, I think that will reduce, because it starts at home, then with your teachers, and then with your peers. And it's amazing, if you listen to girls playing, you can almost pick what each person is taught either in school or at home. And that becomes so hard later on when you're an adult or a teenager to try and undo that narrative. You always fall back to it. And I know, because I know there are so many things in my own life that took a small lifetime, and I'm there like, why did I ever hear that? So it's just, if we start there, that I think for me is a first change the story.
Because then we're boxing, you know, these genders into like, this is your role, this is your role, stick to that, and as if that should be what defines them. So what are some of the things that you think we can do as a society to jump in and protect the girl?
I do think one of them is really recognizing girls as just full human beings who have every right to be here, to occupy the spaces that they occupy. One of my good friends likes to say that you occupy a space that is shaped as Sharon. No one else can occupy that space, only you, right? And girls occupy those spaces in the world regardless of what's going on. But however, because we live in a society, of course we have we have a deep culture of patriarchy and a deep culture of really thinking that the space of girls and women is actually in the kitchen, is to be good mothers, good wives, and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, there can be a lot more. So I do think that just letting girls be girls for themselves, not because they are going to contribute to the economy or because they are going to be super
homemakers
and things like that. I think just letting them be girls, that is one of the things we need to do.
And I guess it goes back to what you were saying, which is having to unlearn these things so that as we're raising our children, that we know what to look out for, what not to say, and how not to box them into these roles. Now, when we come back, we'll delve deeper into how we should all be raising empowered girls in today's society. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back, ladies and gents. I've been talking to Purity and Josephine, and today is the International Day of the Girl Child. And that's exactly what we're talking about, the girl child, how to empower her and make sure that she has the exact skill sets she needs in order to thrive. Because at the end of the day, it's not just good for her, but it's good for everyone. It's good for the community. She ends up paying it forward. So, ladies, growing up, and I ask this because I want to understand this from a very personal perspective and not just speaking about what's going on in society with the girl child. So I want to understand from you personally. Growing up, did you ever find yourself being placed into these like preconceived gender norms, you know, and sort of being boxed into this is what you should do versus what the men around you were being told?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, as I said earlier, I grew up with my grandparents who, God bless them, they didn't tell me, don't do this, you can't do the XYZ because you are a girl.
Yeah.
You know, and Chimamanda says actually that telling someone not to do something because they are a girl doesn't make any sense, right? I don't think my grandparents knew her, but it still makes sense this many years later. But I remember one time, the pastor of this church I used to go to telling me I was too loud for a girl. I was like, what does that even mean? And I do remember consciously thinking to myself how I need to like figure out what did he mean. I'm loud. How can I speak? How can I be softer in how I speak? How can I smile less? So by the time I was transitioning from high school into college, I already had all these issues of just always looking quite moody because I thought, okay, I think when, you know, as a good girl, you should not be smiling too much. And of course, we've had this narrative when we think about the issues to do with sexual assault and abuse. Some of it will be you smiled, so you invited it, you know? So all these things are sort of interconnected. So I had bits and pieces of that. Like, I think my grandparents really didn't box me. And my grandfather,
so they didn't box
me. Like, my grandfather took me out to watch those films that are screened outside at the market center. You know, we went with him and he didn't, and initially, and really in the village, the people who go to watch those things are boys with their fathers. But my grandparents really allowed me to just be myself. But of course, I saw lots of that in my own village, where then, you know, you can't be out at a certain time because you are a girl. There are all these things about sitting properly as a girl, or who you can talk to, especially when girls start getting breasts, you know. So
and what about you, Josephine? Were there any gender-based
Yes, I think for me the best and the most vivid example is I've always, anyone who knows me, I love a good story. So you've gone visiting and I want to sit and listen to the stories. And of course the men are the ones giving, you know, that's where the stories are. But then you're being given that side eye of the kitchen is waiting for you. I'm there like, really? So for me, that was something I never understood. I'm there like, why do we always have to be in the kitchen? What is this rule? Like everything is done, like it can wait. Can we not connect first? So I think for me that's the one thing that
stands out from your childhood. Okay, and now I'm going to share a quote by Melinda Gates, and she said, "It's often said that change starts small, but the truth is it also starts young." Now, how do we then go about raising empowered girls? I know you have a child. You have a son, actually.
I have a son,
right?
Yeah.
But now we're talking about raising empowered girls, and I mean, you deal with a lot of young girls coming into the mentorship program and the scholarship to. Scholarship program. So how are you bringing them up and making sure that they're equipped to face the world?
So the way I bring up the girls at Akili Dada is reminding them that whatever greatness you're looking for is already within you. We all need a bit of sort of fanning that flame into a fire. And I'm committed to fan those flames of girls into a fire so that they can live their best lives without thinking about all these other things in society that try to box us to be one particular thing. So one of the ways I do that is also telling girls that you have options. Choose yourself first. Your life is your life before it belongs to anyone else.
Right.
So the choices you're making even when you're 14, like in our system, the subjects you choose to study, in many ways they can really dictate the rest of your life.
Right. How young are the girls who come
They're
into?
13. From 13 to 19 years old.
Yeah.
But then if you've chosen to say, maybe you are good at in math when you're in high school, then you went to study something like engineering and you're not good at it, you can always change your mind. You know, because I think like I feel like our society doesn't offer as many options as women to change our minds and to be more than one thing. So my way of nurturing girls is to say you can be more than one thing, you can always change your mind. You owe yourself the permission to be anything that you want to be, and the more you cultivate really giving yourself permission, the easier it is to navigate the world.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear you. What about you, Josephine?
I think for me, just 3 quick things is one, being intentional. We're in a day and age where there's a lot of information. So just being very intentional on the information that you're giving them, so that then it's easy to get the wrong information. So just, is it finding a way to package it so that then it's palatable to them and it's fun, but it then has a stronger message. And then being deliberate. It won't happen automatically, because we can keep ranting and saying gender equality, girls empowerment, but if no one is breaking it down to them, then we're not being fair. And then the last thing is, I read a quote once that I absolutely love: don't tell me, show me. If I'm not being everything I'm asking you to be,
then
what
if
am
you're
I
not
saying?
standing up for yourself, if you're not, being open to changing your mind, like you were just saying,
or like what Purity
yourself
says,
first.
I've not discovered what's within me, the power within me. I've not given myself permission. I'm always living apologetically, like, oh, I don't deserve. No.
Then they pick that up, and that's what they end up emulating.
Absolutely.
So I know earlier you were saying that it took like a small life before you even realized, wait, when did I internalize these gender norms, and how can I start to unlearn that? And I think a lot of us, myself included, carry these norms and these assumptions around the roles and what a woman should do, what a man should do, what a girl should do, what a boy should do. So how do we start the process of unlearning? Are there specific tips so that we are very conscious as we're speaking to young girls, as we're raising young girls and boys too? Do you have any tips around that?
I think I can start with one. I'm curious to hear what Purity will say. I think the first thing is interrogate. And by interrogate is sit down and find out this value that I hold or this truth that I espouse. Where did I get it from? Was the source good? Was it from a place of fear? Was it handed down because they didn't know any better? So first interrogate. Then if it's good, keep it and take it to the next level. If it's not, then you know what, forgive the person, release them. They didn't know any better. It was probably handed over to them through the generations. So be the one to now start a new culture and a new tradition. So for me, I always say interrogate, because then there's a danger in saying that all values are wrong and all. No. Some are actually good. But just sit down and just interrogate and be honest. It's something where I even like for emphasis to say be honest. Like, you have to go deep down.
Honest. I love that.
Really
what about you, Purity?
One of the ways I see is repeating the message. Sometimes we think we talk about gender equality, or this is what empowering girls look like. We give it, a day or so, then we move on. Other things happen, we get carried away, and we move on until next year. You know, there are many things we do like that. But for me, it's repeating the message. So for example, some of the things I do is teach girls the same thing for at least 3 years. You know, consecutively for at least 3 years. Because then if I'm being told I'm great for 3 years, surely I have to believe it at some point, right?
Powerful.
That is so powerful. That is so, actually, Purity, talking about the girls and what you do for them on a daily basis, I think the stats right now are that about 62 million girls don't have any kind of education available to them. How important is education when it comes to a young girl?
We cannot even start to describe how important education is, because I think it gives people choices. It helps you speak the language of the world. If it's about learning English or learning how to count, there's only, I mean, there are not too many ways of doing math, right? There are not too many ways of speaking English. You either know it, and if you know it, you're included. You can move from Kenya to wherever. You will always be included because people understand you. So education for me just gives people that sort of dignity. It's like a cloth of dignity for anyone who has it, because then it helps you figure yourself, figure the world and how you want to occupy the spaces, and most importantly, negotiate for yourself. Because then if we're not speaking the same language, I mean, we could be, we could think we are saying the same thing, but we are really not saying the same thing.
Right. Speaking of negotiation, I was actually looking at Joanna Kinuthia's Insta stories recently, and she was having the conversation about women and pricing themselves in a very professional way, like when you're putting together a rate card or when you're going in for an interview and they're asking you about the salary, and how often we, you know, we just fall short of that. And now I want to dive into the professional space, the workplace. I don't know if you heard this, but General Motors was recently named the best company when it comes to gender equality, and that's because they have a female CEO, and about half the members on its board are women, the other half are men.
Well done.
Yeah, I know. It's like, Now, how can companies contribute to this conversation around gender equality and making sure that it's a level playing field, as level as it can be, I guess?
Wow, that's an interesting one. I think the first thing is by, even when you're putting out the job descriptions, don't be in a hurry. You know, there's that thing of, oh no, it's only men who came for the interview, so we had to pick a man. I think just be very intentional, and I like what you're saying about General Motors, that they must have been intentional to have that 50-50 balance. It didn't happen by chance that, whoa, we had 30 women and 30 men at the same time. No. So I think it's being intentional and deliberate about how you hire, and then the culture within the organization. For example, I would hate to feel that because I'm female and I want to start a family, Purity or a certain man will be 10 steps ahead of me because I can't control the whole maternity break. And
speaking on that, I was once referred to as damaged goods when I was pregnant. And I was like, wow. And it was by a man. But sorry, go on.
Just wanted to lean in on that aspect of what can companies do to ensure that women are actually coming along. I think, and Josephine has touched on it, is just recognizing the triple or more than triple roles of women. Because as a woman manager, you have, if you have a child, you have many other responsibilities. It's about running school errands, taking them to hospital. If your child is sick, you're the one who is there most of the time. Even at the hospitals, they actually think that if your child is getting admitted, it is the parent, the mother who will be there. Which means then you have to take time off work.
And you end up, there needs to just be an allowance for that.
For that.
So I know you also deal with, you know, the girls end up going to uni. After that, do you ever give them any kind of counseling on how they can then transition into this career and into the professional space?
Absolutely. So our counseling, so the way our programming is structured is that we have counseling throughout, because now we have all these issues, I mean, issues to do with mental health are coming to the limelight. Although they've been there, but now, at least people are talking a bit more about it. So we ensure that because of the kinds of backgrounds our girls come from, and some of them maybe have even been victims victims of, you know, they've been sexually abused.
Yeah.
So we put counseling as really a bare minimum of what we offer. And that is to ensure that if we're telling a girl to excel in her academics, we're also taking care of all these other issues around her that could actually impact how she ends up performing.
Right.
But then, like our work with the university students is purely focused in ensuring that we have more young women transitioning more successfully into the workforce. Because we get into unis, you get a boyfriend, and then our society says, you know, go wash his clothes, whatever. And yeah, actually, you know, young women fall off in the cracks. They don't graduate, or they delay the time because you've had a child, whatnot.
And you put someone else first.
You put someone else first,
yeah.
But then when such things happen, we wanted to ensure that we actually say pregnancy is not the end of the road for you. So then if you'd already been volunteering, doing an internship. So like we actively take interns who have just finished Form 4. They have zero work experience.
And the better. That's when you even start. That's when you start to, you know, realize like, did I even want to do accounting? Now when you're in it, you're like, actually, I'm more. I want to let my creative spirit
And most important, by the time you're you're in university or finishing college, you have work experience because every employer asks you, what is your work experience? So you can, by the time you're finishing your 4 years of university, you can say, I have 7 years of work experience. You have been interning.
Incredible.
So then they transition better. So we decided to work in public universities because as an organization we are also really keen on hiring young people.
I love that. I love that. We have to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll try and see how we can all be involved, including you who's watching this right now. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back, ladies and gents. I'm talking to two powerful women about the girl child and how they are contributing in society today in making sure that we're bringing up empowered girls. And now I want to pose a question that might be a little bit controversial, but I think it's worth getting into because I'm pretty certain someone is going to raise it. And you know what? Rightly so. Let's have the conversation.
Why not?
There's always, whenever there's a conversation around the girl child, the question around the boy child comes into play. And a lot of times it's posed in the sense that we're having too much conversation about the girl child, and in doing so, we're killing the boy child. What are your thoughts around that?
I personally think and feel that I feel like the two are separate conversations. If we're investing in girls, it has nothing to do with taking away from boys, because it's not a competition. What girls need is very different from what boys need. And people have asked me, why do you only program for girls? And my answer is, if you want to do the same thing for boys, come, I'm doing what I know best, and based on my own personal experiences, these are the challenges I wanted to respond to, because I can see how they affect girls for the long term. How about we figure out how men come together and do something for boys? Because research also does show that women learn best from women, men learn best from other men. So if we all took our part of this cake and decided this is how we are going to divide it in this section, I think this conversation would be done away with. But as a society, I feel like sometimes we look at everything from a really scarce mentality.
So it's either me or you.
It's either you have it and I don't. We can't coexist in this space and say, actually there's space to program for boys, there's space to program for girls. And even as I say this, I do see the need to actually program for boys, because we are seeing, we are seeing so many new issues emerging. I don't think they are new. It's just that now, there's social media, they're in the limelight.
Like, for instance, there's even the conversation around how there's more and more men who are having mental health issues coming up. So again, it's not clear whether it's that it's more and more men, or now they're just
it's not new. I think men are now talking about it. But then our societies, if men talk about such things, then it will be seen you're not a strong man. You're being emasculated because you've talked about your mental issues. So I think men need to create spaces for themselves, safe spaces for themselves, because girls and women have come from such a disenfranchised space. It's like survival for the fittest. If you really need to run, eventually you're going to really be sprinting because you know my survival depends on this.
Right.
And where women and girls have come from, if you look back even 50 years ago, when if you had twins they would be killed. You would, you know, in some societies, you know, there were lots of things.
Right.
Girls got married at
they still do.
They still do get married at 14.
Very young.
You know,
even younger.
If you have a chance to run away from that, you're definitely going to run, right? And you're going to equip the next person so that they can even run faster than you. And I think that's what has not happened for men, because the system already worked for them. The system said you're the man, you're the king of the whatever, if it's a jungle, whatever we call it, where we live, you know, you're the king. However, the system of the world has changed. And we just talk about climate change, but even the way we interact, men and women, we have more educated women now. We have,
so
you know, so there's a shift.
Yeah, there needs to be a shift.
Yeah, and that shift needs to be for I mean, I feel like for women it has shifted, especially if you're in the in more urban areas. If you go to the villages of this country, or even just in Kagwiria, you don't even need to go far. Some of these things are still ongoing.
Still exist.
However, for men, I think they need to smell the coffee and do something about this situation.
Now, speaking of men, Josephine, how can men be involved in the movement for the girl child, and should they be involved?
Yes, it should be. We are, and I like what Purity had said earlier, we are a very patriarchal society, so men still have, their voice is still very powerful. So when they say something, it resonates faster. At times where as a woman it would take a longer time for the same message to be taken on. Men play a very unique role in that once they get it, they become, like we've seen empowered men. We have men who are fighting for FGM.
We have, a perfect example. You want to say his name?
Yes, Tony Mwebia.
Right, King Kaka is now with the sanitary pads.
And the power of a man rising and saying, I'm fighting for my daughter, my wife, my sister, future generations to come, is just phenomenal. So for me, I think it's what Purity is saying. First, they need to, it's okay. It's okay to outwardly come out and say, I'm supporting women. And I think in this country, every time we say gender equality, most men think, Mulienda Beijing, bado tu muka hapo. I mean, like, it's so negative, right? But when you break down the issues under gender equality, that could have been your daughter who's raped, or your daughter who's married off to a man who's 60 years old. I think when they begin to understand, when you break it down to them, and they run with their agenda, for me, I'd say, let's bring on more men on board. They do a phenomenal job.
That we can still find ourselves championing for the other gender, and rightly so. But I do also understand that sometimes you just understand the issues much better as a woman and as a man, and that's why you'll be the first in that line trying to pull your sister or your brother out of it.
But now, I'll also, sorry, to just to challenge also the women, don't be afraid to break it down so that the men can understand. Because at times we're coming like, what, you don't understand all these things, we've been trying to fight this for all these years. So just break it down, let them understand, and then they'll catch on the fire and run with their agenda.
Only that sometimes it's no time. Things are urgent. We need to get stuff done, you know.
We move on. Now, Hollywood has had a lot to say about gender equality in the past year or two. There's been a lot of movements, whether it's the Me Too or the Time's Up movement, and it's inspired. There's something happening right now that you cannot stop in Hollywood. How do we bring that here? How do we make that something that resonates with the everyday woman and man too? What should we be doing?
Part of it is actually just having the conversation. So the history of Kenya, especially in the non-profit sector, was that people organized around one issue. So if it's about the referendum for the constitution, or we want a new constitution, people organized. And I think why the Me Too movement is so powerful, it's because it's around a particular industry where all these people can see their own commonalities and they're able to rally around that. So as a country, in bringing this conversation home, I mean, we have had in the recent, I think last 2-3 months or so, there has been lots of cases around sexual abuse, women even being killed and things like that. And I think we need to revive that sort of activism to rally around one issue over a long period of time. And it doesn't mean that if we are rallying around one issue, there can't be two issues. It can be more than one issue that we are rallying around.
And I think social media has been a really great tool.
Absolutely.
Purity, how many years have you been at Akili Dada? 7 years. What kind of change have you witnessed in society in those 7 years?
A lot of change, because some of it has been to just see girls being recognized as leaders in the spaces that they are in, whether it's at the school or in the villages where they come from. So part of what our girls do is really go and start community service projects. So this girl who everyone thought was going to drop out of school comes back and says, oh, I see we don't have a public library, so I'm going to start one.
Wow.
So seeing that change has been incredible. In the corporate sector, of course, we have more women CEOs, more women in the private sector, in management and things like that. Of course, sometimes we don't really talk about what's working. We talk about the things that are giving us sleepless nights, which, I mean, human nature, this is how we are, right? But, I mean, we wouldn't be seated here had things not changed. There would be at least another 3 men discussing this day of the girl child and having facts to support it, right? And of course, even just having young people in these spaces coming to discuss issues, whether they are political, whether they're the issues we are discussing now, that has shifted a lot. And I'm grateful to be living in such a time as now, because I do know there's a lot of hope, and we are likely to see a lot of the changes we push for, we are likely to see it in our lifetime.
I was actually going to ask that. Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Do you feel like it's right on the cusp, but it's about to there's about to be a shift?
I think there's a lot of light, because as I was saying earlier about the history of Kenya organizing, like in the early 90s when Kenya was pushing for multi-party democracy, there was Reverend Timothy Njoya, and he really is pro-women. I think he's really a feminist. He talks about women issues, he talks about sexuality, things like that. And now we have others like King Kaka, who we are mentioning here. We have, you know, other people who organize on issues to do with corruption. I
actually can't wait to have King Kaka on the show to just understand how did you even start. Now, Josephine, this campaign started in this year, March 8th. So it's about 6-7 months or so. What's been the biggest milestone or something that you're really proud of in those few months?
Wow, I'd like to say all months have been great, but I think for me, one of the key ones was when the men came together and just hearing them have conversation. We had Wahiga Maura, we had John Alanamu, we had UNFPA, we had Femnet Kennedy, and we had Jerry Santos, who's a footballer, and just hearing that conversation. And there were so many moments where they would keep silent and they're like, oh wow, we didn't know that was a gender inequality moment. So just seeing the light bulb going on, and we kept saying, and when we were done, all of them said, I'm going to start this conversation in my workplace or at home. You could see their mindset, I mean, has shifted. Then the next one was when we were in Kagwiria, the community visit, and women had been gathered to just say how FGM has affected them. But then there were men, and the men were so passionate. There was this one man who actually wrote a song just to say, I'm supporting women, and it ends now.
Because at the end of the day, that's why it's called Better for Kenya. At the end of the day, gender equality is better for Kenya. So what exciting things are coming up for the campaign that people could possibly participate in?
Excellent. So we have a lot of exciting things. We have a race coming up. We have different... A race, yes. So that's going to be November. We have different community activities still lined up and different workshops. So if people can follow us on our media platforms, social media platforms, that's at Better for Kenya. We'll keep them posted and let them know how they can plug in and just keep raising their voice towards gender equality.
I hear you. What about Akili Dada? What's happening? How can young girls who are watching right now sign up and be a part of the program? Is there a certain time where calls are made and their intakes?
Yeah, right now we have a call for university students to come learn about leadership and career preparedness, which I was talking earlier, just getting your CV ready and starting to take up those internships. And we also have a leadership academy for girls who are just out of high school or still in high school. So the holidays are coming. We now have 2 months holiday between November and December, and we want to program for girls who we don't necessarily target to come and be part of our program, learn about how to take care of themselves, learn about how to own their voices and articulate themselves in the various spaces they are in.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you go to our website, akilidada.org, you'll find all the information there to sign up.
Last question before we sign out, because I know we're out of time at this point, but I really want to put this in. Kids learn not by what you say, but what you do. That's what they observe, and then they emulate that.
Yes.
So what should we be striving to be? What kind of values should we be upholding as women so that young girls can one day pick those up and run with it?
I think for me, I'll touch on two, and then maybe I can add on. One is authenticity.
Love that.
Be very, very authentic in everything, and then be honest that it's okay to fail. I think there's this thing of makeup set, power woman. No, also let them see that yes, I fell, but I'm getting back up.
Authenticity and honesty.
For me, those are the powerful.
Purity.
Mine is find yourself. Be yourself. You know, actually it's find yourself, know yourself, be yourself.
Love that.
Period.
Find yourself, know yourself, and be yourself. What a beautiful way to end the show. Thank you so much, ladies. It's been an honor having you share exactly what you do for a living and why you're so passionate about these causes. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Now I'm going to end it with a quick TBT for you guys, because today's a Thursday, so we're going to take it back to the type of toys kids played with. Now, this is so different compared to what kids in this day and age play with, which is the PlayStations and the video games and just constantly in front of the television. So much has changed from, like, you know, hopscotch and like blada. Anyway, remember to follow us on social media. That's Living With Us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. But for now, I'm going to love you and leave you as usual. And I'll see you tomorrow, 8 a.m., because we're talking to the cast of BYSS, which is going to be crazy. That's because you said so. It's going to be a super funny show. You don't want to miss this.